in the meantime, I know that one of the popular topics that is trending these days is beautiful woman, and how there's this perception that all of these women almost are chasing the same kinds of men, and these are the 1% men. Who are these 1% men? Is it worth it? Or are a woman not thinking rationally when they're doing that? So I thought we'd undertake this topic. All right, first of all, I want to start with this idea of the beautiful girl who knows that she's so beautiful that she deserves to basically find somebody with a lot of power, money, and opportunities, right? And is basing that on the idea that she is a 10, I don't know, an 11. Here's something that I want to mention to you girls. You might very well be that. It's true, you might be very beautiful, you might be a 10, you might be an 11. But if you know that, you know that you conform that well to the standards of modern society, then odds are the kind of beauty that you have is a little bit cookie cutter. Which is to say, it's the kinds of lips that everyone else has, the kinds of hair extensions everyone else has, the kind of eyelash extensions everyone else has, the kind of makeup and facial contouring that everyone else has, the kind of body type that is trending today. And cookie cutter beauty doesn't stand the test of time. Because the kind of beauty that stands the test of time is the kind of beauty that has something unique about it. And therefore, by definition, it can be a perfection because of its imperfection. But it's not a perfection by popular vote or by common standards. For example, you take care of yourself very well, but you never took care of that gap between your front teeth. And that gap between your front teeth makes you unique. Or you have very surprised eyebrows naturally. You were born that way. And instead of trying to fix your eyebrows, you allow them to be, and you turn it into one of your characteristics. A person may look at you who is used to cookie cutter beauty, and they won't give you a 10. They won't say you're an embodiment of human perfection, but your beauty is going to last the test of time. And I think we're starting to lose sight of that a little bit. We're entering that generation where everybody looks like everyone else. And it's not that our tastes are wrong, that we didn't measure the golden ratio correctly, but make sure that you incorporate a little bit of uniqueness. Make sure that you leave that flavor that allows you to actually be you and not to be Sarah and Elena and everybody else in the world. And of course, part of what that is going to be your energy itself. It's going to be not in the body, it's going to be in the way that you animate the body. All right, so now that we've gotten this out of the way, I am a person who spent, starting from the pre-teens, I spent most of my life, because of my parents, because of my dad, surrounded by millionaires, multimillionaires, and even billionaires. So I definitely have a very strong understanding of that world, the men in that world, how they are, what they want, what their wives are like, what their lovers are like, how faithful they are, and things like that. So let's look at that a little bit. Most of the men that I know, they married their wives before their big successes, before they became the millionaires, the multimillionaires, the billionaires. Basically, they stuck, even if they were unfaithful, and trust me, most of them are, they stuck with the girl that chose them for them. They didn't go ahead and choose a girl who was impressed by their money. They usually would choose that girl as a lover. They might spend some time with that girl, but they married the girl that was there at the beginning, bonding with them and making the strongest impression on them. That's when they were the most emotionally available. That's where they were the most emotionally vulnerable. And once they accumulated the wealth, once they accumulated the power and became somebody and made a name for themselves, all eyes were on their wives or partners. Usually it's their wives, because this was a generation of men who married, and who married pretty young. And those weren't kind eyes. Everybody wanted to be that woman, because that woman seemed to have all the travel, all the wealth, all the opportunities. She was the woman that everyone looked up to. And so the amount of envy, the amount of jealousy, the amount of criticism directed at that woman, believe me, you cannot be a weak or even an ordinary normal woman and handle that. It is very difficult. Almost everybody that they come into contact with makes kind, friendly faces at them and hates them behind their back. Because for almost everybody, these women represent something that they should have been, and maybe for some reason feel that they don't have it within themselves to be. These are not kindnesses that they're receiving from people, especially if it's not a dynamic where the wife in obvious physical ways helped the husband become the man that he did, and it looks like the husband did all the work and the wife was just raising the children, just taking care of the home, just being a lover or a friend. Then everybody will feel like she didn't earn it, and why should she have it, and why should they not have it? And on top of that, imagine the amount of insecurity that you're constantly facing. This is a guy that everybody, if he's also handsome, if he's also intelligent, this is a guy that everybody wants, that everybody is trying to get, that everybody is dreaming about. And they only need to succeed once. Only one of them needs to be successful. And you, as the partner of that guy, need to be able to defend your turf every single day. It's exhausting. Do you know what I observed in these women? A lot of them became mentally ill. A lot of them behind closed doors are really, really mentally unstable. Some of them are suicidal. Some of them are bipolar. Some of them are schizophrenic. Some of them were borderline to begin with. There's a lot of mental instability there because there's a lot of pressure, and a lot of women crack, a lot of women can't handle it. A lot of these women are left because the men have the options to leave them, and they try to protect themselves. And the way that they try to protect themselves is putting the larger part of the wealth in their names if they have influence over their husband, or by basically being extremely proprietary with the children, acting like the children are extensions of them and private property, and constantly blackmailing their partner with the kids. And then obviously that is negatively going to affect the child. The child is going to develop psychological disorders as a result of that kind of treatment. But the woman can barely help herself because it's one of her trump cards. And she has very little power in this power dynamic if you actually objectively look at it. So there's the kind of woman that make it in the long run with partners like that make it a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades. Not always, but more often than not, they're not emotionally mature enough to understand what is going on. They're children on the inside. And because they're children on the inside, they're not asking themselves basic questions. They're not saying, everybody I know is getting cheated on. Am I also getting cheated on? Why do I think that I'm an exception? Am I really that much more beautiful than everybody else in the world? Do we have a strong emotional connection? Are we feeding into that emotional connection? Do I want to grow as a person? Am I also doing something with my life? Or am I not doing that because there's really no motivation for me to do that because somebody else is constantly providing for every single need that I have? And the kind of person that would stay in a relationship and not constantly question these things and be completely submissive, and go along and not question how did my partner accumulate all this wealth at the end of the day, not be partaking in these kinds of decisions. These are people that tend to be children emotionally. They tend to be very emotionally immature, and they're not real partners, and their husbands, they don't really love them. Maybe they value family, maybe it's convenient for them because she has all the wealth, she has the kids, maybe they're using them, but almost never in these kinds of relationships, without faith, without a strong moral compass, without spirituality, without faith in God, will you find a situation where the partner really loves her and the partner is really loyal to her. Most of these men cheat. On very, very rare occasions have I heard about a situation where they went all together on a rampage with prostitutes to bond like men, and one of them just spent the whole night talking to the prostitute because he decided he was going to be faithful to his wife. It's happened, the prostitutes were mad, but it's rare. It is. It usually doesn't happen. Usually these kinds of men, they are entitled. It's that kind of sense of entitlement that led them to be as successful as they are. It's a trauma in many cases that pushed them, that gave them the fuel to reach incessantly for those kinds of levels. And the amount of vulnerability, the amount of empathy, often have that towards people whom they are completely secure in. For example, children. For example, parents. It's often harder for these men who aren't also spiritually connected to feel that towards in horizontal dynamics, in vertical relationships with people who can betray them, with people who can walk away. And now that I mentioned the emotional immaturity of the women themselves, let me tell you that most of these women also cheated. Not all of them, but most of these women also cheated. And it's not even because they realized that their husband is cheating. It's not because they were having big fights. It's not because their financial needs were not getting met. It's because they were bored. It's because they had nothing to do, basically. And instead of working on themselves, instead of striving for something, because they were so much less motivated to do that. And even when it came to taking care of the kids, there's nannies taking care of the kids. There's cooks and cleaners and drivers taking care of everything else. And she needs to feel important somehow. And he basically, with his success, he took away every possibility of her feeling needed and of her feeling important as anything but his lover. And so she attempts to glorify herself as the lover woman. And she needs to base that on something. She's going to base that on her sexuality. She's going to base it on her beauty. And because her safety depends on it, on her being able to do that, she's not going to be objective about these things either. So those of you who think it's so great to be with the 1% men, if in that percent morality is included, if they come from old money and old boundaries and you can penetrate these boundaries, if spirituality, intelligence, emotional intelligence is included in that, sure. But other than that, I'd say hell no. It's you are going to be selling your life force, your self-esteem, your safety, your sexual energy. You're going to be trading it for the money you are. And it's going to very negatively affect your personal growth. It's a different situation if both of you are creating this kind of wealth together. If this is a bit of a dynamic of where he's making the money and you're finding a way to preserve it and to grow it and he trusts you with that, that can work out a little bit better and the two of you respect each other. But in the 90s and the early 2000s, when I was growing up, that simply wasn't the case. And the case was definitely that the man is dominating, the woman is subservient, and she becomes very arrogant, she becomes very entitled. In order to feel safe, she convinces herself that she's Cleopatra, she's Aphrodite, whatever it is. She's much more beautiful and refined and sexual than every other woman in the world, and it was almost never true. It was almost always a kind of delusional account of things in order for her to be able to manage the level of insecurity, of envy, of jealousy, of stress, of lack of emotional connection that she was constantly dealing with. And again, for the guy, it's not a whole lot better. The guys, they live in this delusional, naive bubble where they think that because there's such a catch, she's going to be true to them, she's going to appreciate them. They take them for granted. They become emotionally unstable. They become entitled. They more often than not cheat on their partners and cheat on their husbands. They destroy the psyche of the children by trying to use them as pawns and manipulate them against the father figure at the end of the day as well. And they try to hoard all the money. I've even witnessed situations where women were so successful at doing that a guy that was multi-millionaire, way up there in the dozens of millions, and that was years ago, would end up pretty much unable to leave her because he would end up completely penniless because she assured that anything he brought home ended up with her. So, and she wasn't happy. She didn't end up happy either, because as you do onto another person, so you're doing onto yourself. And if you end up taking from another person, unless you're also elevating others and giving it to someone else, life is a mirror, and as a maximum 14 years from now, because that tends to represent a karmic cycle, it's going to come back to you and you're going to encounter somebody who takes and takes and takes from you. Now, let's talk about this idea that is a girl right in thinking that she has the right, because she is beautiful, to ask for that to be exchanged for diamonds, to be exchanged for money, to dismiss guys who don't bring in that kind of very impressive wealth into the equation. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video, watch out for cookie cutter beauty. A lot of girls who have money are cookie cutter beautiful. Make sure that you are uniquely, timelessly beautiful. And that means that you have something perfect. You are perfect in your imperfection in some way, not in a big way, but in some minor way. You're perfect in your imperfection. That also means that you have range. So let's talk about the ways in which you are right in thinking that, but also the things that you're probably not keeping in mind. So the first step to a man falling in love with you is him feeling attracted to you. Pretty much always. Now, that attraction isn't always physical. That attraction can come because you look like a younger version of his grandma, and he loved his grandma more than anybody else in the world. Because the kind of energy, the kind of tone of voice that you're exuding reminded him of this girl that he had a massive crush on in high school but never ended up getting together with. And he sees that in you, and shivers go down his back, and he thinks, this is definitely my woman. But more often than not, the thing that gets him attracted to you is the fact that you're attractive. So in that sense, obviously your beauty is going to be valuable. But then almost immediately comes the second step. And in the second step, what he's going to look at to see if he can fall in love with you is, are you interesting in some way? Are you unique in some way, different from the rest? And are you admirable within that difference, more likely than not? More often than not, I would say. So he wants to see that, yes, she's beautiful, but she's not beautiful like every other beautiful girl that he knew who can't put two words together or only talks about the last soap that she saw on TV. There's something different about this one. He needs to be able to say himself. And then as he invests a little bit of himself examining what is it that makes you different and unique, he finds that thing admirable, or he finds something in the process about you that is admirable. Why does he need to find that? Because he needs to be able to admire you in order to be able to idealize you. He transitions from admiration, or she transitions if you are into girls, they transition from admiration to idealization after they have admired you for long enough. As they transition to idealization, you're starting to look at the first steps of falling in love. They idealize you, then they idealize you some more. Then you become someone special to them. And this is where the falling in love stage is the most fragile. This is where you can show that you don't have that feminine energy, that you're constantly closing the gap, that you're insecure, that you can break that idealization. You can show him with some definitive actions that he's completely wrong about you. And he can, in most cases, at that point, just drop that idealization regardless of how beautiful you are. But if that idealization grows for long enough, eventually what it will transition into is the idealization of himself through you. He will put you on the pedestal. And then he will start looking at himself through your eyes and liking the version of him that he is being, the version of him that he's seeing, liking what he believes that you are bringing out in him. And that is the more grounded, the more solid phase of falling in love. And again, imagine you can't just be beautiful at that point unless he's very young and he's met very few beautiful women. At that point, you truly have to have something unique about you, something worthy of idealization, so that he can use you as a figure of judgment, of fair and favorable judgment for himself. So yes, you probably at that point would have needed to show him some kind of liking or some kind of attention. Usually most men would, again, unless they're very young boys, would not be able to build that idealization on a foundation of absolutely nothing. In order to be able to build that idealization, you need to have in one way or another indicated to him that he's not repulsive to you and that you like him. So once that idealization takes place, the falling in love has taken place. And again, when you're saying, I deserve that guy, you're saying, this guy will appear. He will be moral. He will be spiritual. He will be intelligent. He will be attractive. He will be extremely rich. He will find me attractive. He will find me unique and different and admirable. He will successfully idealize me while I'm not ruining that. And then I will show him a liking in just the right way, in the right quantity for him to be able to idealize himself for me. That is a little bit presumptuous for anybody to assume that that is just something that you're going to be able to bring about and that is just something that is going to happen. It can, but I don't know why you would assume that. And then this is where most relationships fail, assuming that you started some kind of relationship, even if it's not yet a romantic one. They fail in this transition from the phase of I am in love with you to the phase of we have a mastermind together and I love you. Because what starts coming out once this is a more solid relationship of some kind is your traumas start coming out. Their traumas start coming out. For example, if you had incurred some traumas in your past relationship and they do something that reminds you of the patterns of behavior that this other person was displaying, what they do may be kind of not that significant, but you're going to blow it out of proportions because it's a psychological trigger for you, and you're going to start punishing them for the transgressions of your previous partner. They can do the same to you. Or they may discover that, you may discover that they really love novelty. They're, what is it called, a neophiliac. And while you are beautiful, you don't have range. You are one kind of beautiful, you're not particularly adaptable. And though they really like you, they feel like they need to supplement it. And that is obviously, if you're monogamous, not going to be acceptable to you. Or you discover you're sexually incompatible. There you've been building this relationship for months, and then you find out that they don't like threesomes and bondage like you. They like to starfish to romantic music, gentle romantic music, and that's the only way that they enjoy themselves. So there's a whole number of things that can happen at that point, and usually does. But if you then successfully overcome that, it's not significant enough, you're emotionally mature enough, you work through it, and you transition to a mastermind, which your relationship is, then at that point you have a mastermind that is going to potentiate and feed both of you. And this is the part that many somewhat misogynistic men would deny a beautiful girl, but that she is absolutely right about. Sexual energy and abundance are interchangeable. A beautiful girl will bring to the table more sexual energy. She will awaken more sexual energy in him, and she will be most likely, because she is beautiful and she likes herself, more sexual. And because she is more sexual, she will have more of that energy to feed into him. And that can be transmuted into all kinds of abundance. It can be transmuted into abundance of wealth. It can be transmuted into an abundance of health, into an abundance of friends and social interactions, into an abundance of support, into an abundance of an ability to manifest your goals. If, for example, they're humanitarian goals or any kinds of goals of that kind, or maybe you want 20 children, that's the kind of abundance that you manifest. But they are people who are not energetically attuned. They don't realize that oftentimes when you have blockages, and those blockages are related to your abundance, more often than not, you have blockages in your sexual energy, or your partner has blockages in their sexual energy, or you're allowing too many third parties into your mastermind, which are negatively affecting your mastermind. Now, what is going to be happening within the mastermind itself is that you're going to be idealizing them. You're going to be desiring them. Through this idealization, through this desire, you are sending massive amounts of energy their way, and it's the kind of energy that brings out the best aspects of them. They're going to be idealizing themselves through your eyes, which is going to be positively affecting their self-concept. Their self-concept is going to be directly affecting their ability to attract good and positive things into their lives and to change for the better. And they're going to be idealizing you, giving you massive amounts of love, of admiration, of energy as well. And as you do unto others, so it shall be done unto you. So if they're giving that to you, it will also be coming back to them. So you are increasingly creating this kind of engine if you love each other. If you desire each other, if you have a friendship, if you have a passion, if you have admiration, you are creating that engine where you're bringing out the best versions of each other. But as you do that, you will encounter difficulties, you will encounter disagreements. You're two different people. You will encounter conflicts. Sometimes you will not see eye to eye. And this is where it's very important that either you have goals in common, you have aspirations and projects in common that both of you are really, really invested in. This is where it's really important that you have that vertical connection, that you have that spirituality, that faith, that moral compass, that maybe this is a partner that comes from old wealth, that has a few more boundaries, standards, and expectations than oftentimes new wealth has, which tends to be a little bit more selfish and amoral and clueless when it comes to preserving money in the longer run. All right, girls, so consider beauty in exchange for wealth. That kind of guy is no longer a 1% guy, because the 1% guy is just wealth, right? But now you're saying, I want him to be moral. I want him to have the right values. I want him to be relatively intelligent. I want him to be relatively handsome. I want him to have a good connection. You're talking about a 1 in 1,000, if not a 1 in 10,000 kind of guy. Maybe you deserve him. Maybe you'll meet him. But don't take it for granted, and don't scoff down at the possibility of growing with somebody who wants to grow and who has the potential to do that. Cheers, love you all, wish you a beautiful day, bye.